Irina Kolpakova, I am a ballerina. When World War II began, we were hastily evacuating Leningrad. My mother and I were lucky enough to hitch a ride in the wagon of a freight train. That was incredible luck. At that time, Mr. Ponomaryov headed the ballet troupe of the Kirov Theater. Vladimir somehow managed to put my mother and me on the roster, and we left Leningrad on the theater's train. That's how we found ourselves in Perm. All the true theater people were quartered in Perm, while we were sent to a place called Motovilicha in the city suburbs. It was a small place like Pushkin under Leningrad. Perm at that time was known as Molotov. It took our train 7 days to get there. My mother and I, among the group of other non-theater people, were left at the train station with our small baggage. Then we all were quartered in homes of local people who didn't show much enthusiasm about our arrival. I remember how angry our landlord looked when she showed us our room. What could we do? War was to blame. Everything looked so strange and alien. I was a little child and my mother was with me, so it was not nearly as hard for me as it was for her. Those were tough years. My mother found a job to support us and I went to a local school. Later on, we learned that the Leningrad Ballet School was accepting children. Mother brought me to Molotov. To get to Molotov from Motovilicha, one had to take a tram. The trip took 40 minutes. They accepted me at the school, and at first my mother would accompany me on the tram. Later, I went alone. Several times we just walked to Molotov. Now I cannot even imagine how that was possible. Sometimes the tram would be so crowded that I had to force my way in from the footboard to the front. Very few people were eager to give me a seat on account of the long distance, the slow-moving tram, so often I arrived at school late. My father's family lived in Kargopol, an old Russian town in the north of Leningrad. My mother was from Estonia. My mother had studied in the night faculty of the choreography school in Leningrad. They had a special group accepting boys and girls of 16. Sergei Korin, who would later become a great character dancer, was in my mother's class. Konstantin Sergeyev also attended the same school, although a little later he transferred to full-time studies. My mother began to study ballet in 1925, at the very time when the great Marina Semyonova graduated from the same ballet school. I returned to Leningrad along with the ballet school in 1944. We lived at the school on Rossi Street and slept on the third floor in large studios. Boys and girls would occupy different studios, and we ate our lunches at the Pioneers Palace on Nevsky Avenue, which was not very close. For the pre-grad class, the students were divided into two parallel groups. One group became Agrippina Vaganova's class, while the other one was taught by Maria Romanova, who was mother to Galina Ulanova. To this very day, I don't know what their principle was in assigning us to this or that particular choreographer. It remains a big secret. Yet, in my case, it seemed to be providential. I would never claim that Vaganova was such a great choreographer because she always got the best students at school. She was so successful because she was the great Vaganova. She had danced on the stage of the Imperial Mariinsky Theater and had been the queen of variations. We often heard her say, "It is all well to dance a beautiful adagio when your partner helps you so much. Show me what you can do alone, upon the stage or at the center of the studio." Vaganova, as ballerina, had herself gone through good schooling. When the famous choreographer Enrico Cecchetti came to Petersburg, Vaganova, as well as Anna Pavlova, Olga Preobrazhenskaya, and Mathilde Ksesinskaya, learned his lessons. Later on, Agrippina Vaganova would combine all that knowledge and experience into her own method of teaching classical dance. This system is indeed our national school of classical dance. Now and then I hear people say, well, this ballerina has good arms, but as for her legs, she would be better copying the Western style. I disagree. Our national school of classical dance, at its very foundation, is completely self-sufficient. One must know what it has to offer, that's all. Agrippina Vaganova was always so elegant, always well-dressed. She was often wearing lovely low-heeled patent leather shoes. Her hairdo was in the popular style of the time and was always perfect as well. She was not tall at all, but very slender. Vaganova held such authority over us that in her class she didn't have to portray power. All she needed to do was to tell us in a calm voice what she wanted us to do, and that was it. She was strict in class, yes, but we would do anything for her. We loved her immensely. It was not due to any fear. We just couldn't do anything which would upset her or make her sad. She could send you away from her lesson. Leave now, go home and think. Come back tomorrow and we'll see what you can do. I don't remember her giving me any particular preference over other students, but I think she had a liking for me. She appeared to treat all her students equally. Well, I would agree that all her students were capable dancers, so she, as a choreographer, could expect much from them, and made them do as she saw necessary, although we were all very happy to comply. She taught us so well, so thoroughly and straightforward. She would explain each movement clearly, walking us slowly through all of it from beginning to end. She would explain the development of each melodic and choreographic line. All combinations she taught us were constructed logically, and she would explain clearly where a strong movement was necessary and a rise was required. She made us work our bodies so that they weren't rigid but flexible, and changing posture accordingly. I do not remember her raising her voice in class. Sometimes she'd say, "That was good," and we considered that the highest praise. If you heard her good in the studio, that meant you were doing everything right. In our graduating production of Sleeping Beauty, I danced in the third act of the ballet, Aurora's Wedding. I would in turn dance the parts of Aurora and Florine, two pas de deux, and at the same time I had the leading part in the Dove of Peace production by Kashi Mustayev, who was a dancer at the Kirov Theater. I danced the dove, a strong bird who brings people peace and is itself a symbol of peace. Of course, dancing Aurora and Florine in The Sleeping Beauty was utter bliss, yet the doves part was also interesting in its own right. I remember how once Vaganova talked Pyotr Gusev, the head of the ballet troupe of the Kirov Theater, to give me a part of one of the fairies in the junior cast of The Sleeping Beauty while I was still a student of the ballet school. I remember the jealous looks some of the young dancers who also wanted to dance in that production gave me. After graduation, when I joined the troupe at the Kirov Theater, they put me in the first lines of the corps de ballet. I danced in The Shades, in La Bayadère, I danced the Swan in Swan Lake, I had a part in Les Sylphides, and little by little they began to give me solo parts. They had to advance someone for some classes, and some reasons they chose me. Vaganova didn't live to see that. She died in 1951. We were her last class. At the theater, my choreographer was Elena Lukom, who had in the past been an excellent dancer herself. Elena Lukom was very kind. She seemed to be glowing with kindness. She had radiant blue eyes. When we were preparing my part in Giselle, I would look at her with envy. I wish I had her eyes instead of the narrow slits that I have. If I had had her eyes, I would just enter the stage, open my eyes wide in the madness scene in Giselle, and there you go. That would be a triumph. Lukom was my permanent choreographer then. She worked with me in Giselle, The Sleeping Beauty, Rayamonda. Whatever I danced then, I rehearsed with Elena Lukom. I have never been a brunette. At the ballet school, my hair was brown, and then I dyed my hair blonde when I danced Maria in The Fountain of Bakhchisarai. My choreographer in that production was Vsevolod Ukhov. He was a dancer himself, and the theater administration asked him to help us rehearse The Fountain of Bakhchisarai. During one of the rehearsals, he told me with irritation, "Are you planning to put on that wig? You don't even look like a princess. You look like a peasant's daughter. Are you not Princess Maria? You are Mary, the farmer's girl. Tell your mother to dye your hair." My mother took me by the hand and brought me to the hairdresser. I could hear some women whispering behind my back, "What kind of a mother is she? What does she think she's doing? The poor girl is nothing more than a child. How old is she anyway?" And I was sitting right there, my face burning with embarrassment. At least during the performance, I looked great without my awkward wig. And that is how I turned into a blonde, once and for all. My work at the theater took its course. I joined the theater and was given a good choreographer. I didn't have to do anything besides my work. I watched the performances and I liked them. I was happy, yeah. It was the happiest time of my life.